Am I the only one that didn't know this? You know, one of the most fascinating things about science is how it constantly challenges our assumptions about the universe. But you know what else does that? History. It's not just about dusty old textbooks and memorizing dates. It's about understanding the past, which, as it turns out, is often shrouded in myths and misconceptions. Did you know that Napoleon wasn't actually short? Or that Vikings never wore horned helmets? History is full of myths we were all taught in school, but today we're setting the record straight. Here are 5 of the biggest historical lies you probably still believe. Let's talk about Napoleon Bonaparte, the iconic French military leader who conquered much of Europe. Known for his strategic brilliance and ambitious campaigns, Napoleon's name is etched in history as one of the greatest military minds. But there's another aspect of his legacy that has captured the public's imagination for centuries. Now, most of us picture him as this short, stocky figure, right? This image of Napoleon as a diminutive man has been so pervasive that it's almost become a part of his identity, almost comically small. Turns out, that image is more about propaganda than reality. The idea of Napoleon being exceptionally short is a myth that has been perpetuated over time. You see, Napoleon was measured at 5 feet 6 inches, which, believe it or not, was about average height for a Frenchman in the late 18th century. In fact, some sources even suggest he might have been slightly taller than average. So how did this myth take hold? Well, it's partly due to those sneaky Brits. The British had a vested interest in undermining Napoleon's image and authority. During the Napoleonic Wars, British cartoonists loved to portray Napoleon as this tiny tyrant, emphasizing his height, or lack thereof, to undermine his authority. These caricatures were not just for laughs, they were a strategic tool to diminish his stature, both literally and figuratively. Think about it. A towering giant commands respect, but a short, power-hungry leader, easy to mock. By making him appear smaller, they made him seem less threatening and more ridiculous. This propaganda was so effective that the image of a diminutive Napoleon stuck in the public imagination. Over time, this exaggerated portrayal became accepted as fact. Now, there's also some confusion stemming from the different measurement systems used back then. The French and British had different units of measurement, which added to the mix-up. The French paus was slightly longer than the British inch. This discrepancy meant that when Napoleon's height was converted from French to British units, it made him seem shorter to the British. So Napoleon's height, when converted directly from French to British units, made him seem shorter to the British. This added another layer to the myth of his short stature. It's like a cosmic case of lost in translation, except it's about height and historical perception. So, next time you think of Napoleon as a tiny tyrant, remember it's more fiction than fact. Okay, picture a Viking warrior in your mind. Got it? What's on their head? I bet you're picturing those iconic horned helmets, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but that image is about as historically accurate as a unicorn riding a T-Rex. Real Viking helmets were far more practical and, dare I say, stylish. They were typically made of leather or metal, designed to protect the wearer's head in battle, not to win costume contests. So where did the horns come from? We can thank the 19th century and their flair for the dramatic. During this period, Romanticism was all the rage, and operas like Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen featured Vikings wearing horned helmets. These helmets, while visually striking, were purely a theatrical invention meant to evoke a sense of primal savagery and otherworldliness. Archaeological evidence confirms this. Excavations of Viking burial sites have unearthed actual helmets, and guess what? No horns. These helmets were designed for functionality, not fantasy. Chapter 3. Columbus and the Discovery of America, a story retold. Now this one's a biggie. We're diving into one of the most well-known yet misunderstood chapters of history. For centuries we've been taught that Christopher Columbus discovered America. His name is synonymous with exploration and discovery. But let's be real, folks, you can't discover a land that's already inhabited by millions of people. The Americas were home to advanced civilizations long before Columbus set sail. Long before Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, indigenous populations thrived in North and South America. with diverse cultures, languages and histories spanning millennia. These societies had their own rich traditions, complex social structures and impressive achievements. To say Columbus discovered America is not only inaccurate, but also ignores the rich tapestry of human civilization that existed here long before his arrival. It's a narrative that erases the contributions and existence of entire peoples. And get this, Columbus wasn't even the first European to reach the Americas. The Norse explorer Leif Erikson beat him to it by nearly 5 centuries. Around the year 1000, Norse explorer Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, established a settlement at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada. This site is a testament to the Viking presence in North America long before Columbus. That's almost 500 years before Columbus. Yet Erikson's voyages are often overshadowed by the mythos surrounding Columbus. Furthermore, Columbus never even set foot on what is now the United States. His expeditions primarily took him to the Caribbean islands. His voyages landed him in the Caribbean islands, and his interactions with the indigenous people were often marked by violence, exploitation, and the tragic introduction of diseases that decimated native populations. The impact of his arrival was devastating for the native communities. It's time we move beyond the simplistic narrative of Columbus as a hero and acknowledge the complex and often brutal history of European colonization in the Americas. By doing so, we honor the true history and the resilience of the indigenous peoples who lived here long before Columbus's arrival. Chapter 4. The Great Wall from Space. An astronomical misconception. Here's a myth that's truly out of this world. The idea that the Great Wall of China is the only human-made structure visible from space has been around for decades. You've probably heard that the Great Wall of China is the only human-made structure visible from space. This claim has been repeated in classrooms, books, and even popular media. It's a claim repeated so often that it's practically become common knowledge. Teachers have taught it, students have learned it, and it has been passed down through generations. But guess what? It's just not true. Despite its popularity, this myth doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Astronauts have confirmed that while you can see plenty of amazing things from space, like continents, oceans, and even city lights at night, the Great Wall is not one of them. The Great Wall is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to spot with the naked eye. Why is that? The answer lies in its size and the materials used in its construction. Well, for starters, the Great Wall is relatively narrow, averaging about 20 to 30 feet wide. This might seem large up close, but from space it's a different story. From hundreds of miles up in space, that's like trying to spot a strand of hair from across a football field. The sheer distance makes it nearly impossible to see such a narrow structure. Plus, the Great Wall is made of materials like stone and earth that blend in with the surrounding landscape. This camouflage effect makes it even harder to distinguish from its surroundings. The wall's colour and texture are similar to the natural terrain, adding to the difficulty. So how did this myth gain traction? It's a fascinating story that dates back nearly a century. It's thought to have originated in the 1930s, a time when the world was captivated by grand tales and larger-than-life stories. Before humans even ventured into space, the idea was speculative, based on the limited knowledge and imagination of the time. It was a time when our fascination with both the Great Wall and space exploration was growing. People were dreaming big, and the idea of seeing the Great Wall from space was a captivating notion. And somehow the two got intertwined in a cosmic game of telephone. Over the years, the myth was repeated and embellished, becoming a widely accepted fact. So next time you hear someone say the Great Wall is visible from space, you can set the record straight. It's a great story, but it's just not true. Chapter 5. The Salem Witch Trials, Separating Fact from Fiction. Let's travel back to 17th century Massachusetts, to the infamous Salem Witch Trials. It's a dark chapter in American history, filled with paranoia, fear and injustice. Now, when we think of witch hunts, We often picture pyres, flames, and innocent women being burned at the stake. And while that horrific method of execution was used in Europe, it wasn't the case in Salem. During the Salem witch trials, those accused of witchcraft were actually hanged, not burned. In fact, no one accused of witchcraft in colonial America was ever burned at the stake. However, there's one particularly gruesome exception. Giles Corey, an elderly farmer, refused to enter a plea in court. To force a confession, officials subjected him to a brutal form of torture known as pressing, where heavy stones were piled on his chest until he suffocated. The Salem witch trials stand as a stark reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria, religious extremism, and the failure to uphold due process. It's a cautionary tale from history that continues to resonate today. So there you have it, 5 historical myths debunked. It's amazing how some of these misconceptions become so ingrained in our collective memory. But that's the beauty of history. It's always full of surprises. History isn't always what we think it is. Which of these myths surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more mind-blowing historical revelations every week.